Yeah.
Okie doke. This is Sam from Allwood London from Read Words. Big round of applause.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I didn't realise I was drawing a raffle, so that's quite exciting. Yes, so I'm Sam. I'm a creative director at Read Words. Read Words is we're a brand language agency. So unlike 99% of branding agencies, we have no designers, no visual capability whatsoever. I thought the quickest way of demonstrating that to you would be to show our Christmas card from last year. One of our writers had the idea of Read Birds, where we would all illustrate a kind of festive Christmassy bird. And now that Julian has shown all that beautiful Carluccio Christmas work, I'm even more embarrassed to put this in front of you. But as you can see, there's a lot of effort and enthusiasm, but there are some limitations here. I mean, this one in particular has haunted my dreams for the last couple of months. So we're words people, but we work a lot with designers. We work a lot with design agencies, with freelance designers, with in-house design teams. And really, I'm here today to talk to you about not really visual design, I have no pearls of wisdom to share on that, but how words can fit into the design process, what they mean for designers, what they can inspire you to do. So we're going to do this in a few different ways. The first thing we're going to do is look at words and brands and how they fit together. How can brands use words and language to be more consistent or compelling or eye-catching? We'll get into more specifically what words can mean for design. So how can they fit into the design process? What should you be looking for as future designers from your copywriters or your strategists or anyone who's putting words in front of you? And then finally, we'll get into what words might mean for you all, how it might sort of impact your career and maybe what you should be thinking about as you prepare to go into work. So, there'll also be time for questions at the end. I say, please do shout out. There's a little bit of audience participation in this session. I will be eternally grateful to the first person who puts their hand up. But any questions that sort of come to mind as we go through, please do shout. So, words and brands and what that means. Now, I'm sure we're probably all very familiar with what visual branding looks like, the look and feel of a brand. And of course, I imagine also pretty familiar with what verbal branding is. You know, what a brand says, how it says it. So the messages it puts out about itself and the tone in which it delivers those messages. So the style, the personality that its language kind of conveys. Now, when you put the two together, if they fit, if those jigsaw pieces fit nicely together, you can get something pretty amazing, something that feels really compelling and really coherent. So what we think about when we look at verbal branding or brand language is we're looking for the what, the messages that we want to communicate, and the how, the tone, the style. And often, some brands forget about one or the other. They don't really have anything particularly interesting to say, but they've got kind of an annoying tone of voice, or they sort of put a lot of effort into making their language be sort of sparky and kind of eye-catching. Or maybe they've got some really interesting things to say, but they haven't really thought about the tone in which they're going to deliver those messages. So, there's a lot of nuance here. It was interesting hearing so much about craft in Gary and Julian's session, but I think the same applies to copywriting. It's harder to show. We don't have as many beautiful case studies as designers do. But there's a lot of craft and nuance here because the choices that you can make as a copywriter are kind of limitless. So take Nike, for example. They have Just Do It. Let's imagine instead they went for Go For It. You know, what is the different feel that gives you? Or what does that sort of sound like in your head? For me, Just Do It is urgent and active and aggressive. It's kind of poking you in the chest and kind of marching you out the front door. Go For It, it's a bit weaker, it's a bit lamer, it sounds sort of half-hearted. It's like, yeah, you go for it if you want. You know, it doesn't have that raw urgency. Now, you could try and sort of add a little bit of drama, a little bit of punch to it, stick an exclamation at the end, you know, play around with the craft. Again, you probably you've still got that sense of something being a little half-hearted, a little weak. Now, what about if Nike went for something like, for the athlete inside? It sounds kind of grand and impressive and serious. You can kind of imagine it on the side of a billboard. But actually, when you start to investigate what it's saying, it sounds a bit more elitist than Just Do It. The genius of Just Do It is that the it is kind of left up to your definition. It can be a 5-minute jog down the road, or it can be training for a marathon. It doesn't really matter. You know, the important thing is that you are doing it and you are going out for it. Whereas for the athlete inside starts to sound like we're just talking to athletes here. We're talking to people who identify as athletes, and that may not be all of us. So a line that is universal and kind of works for everyone, this version starts to sound a bit premium, a bit more exclusive and elitist. So that's what we mean when we talk about double branding, about brands and words. And the reason why this stuff matters, and frankly the reason why an agency like Read Words can exist, is that it's just everywhere at the moment. You know, don't let anyone tell you that nobody reads anymore. We are reading and writing more than ever. We are drowning in language all the time in every channel and touch point that we come across. So if we think about a brand like Coca-Cola and think about sort of Mad Men 1960s era kind of advertising, the reality was that Coca-Cola didn't really have that many opportunities to use language. They would have some ad campaigns once or twice a year, they might have a bit of packaging copy, some direct mail, they might do a few leaflets, but really there wasn't actually that much opportunity for them to use language. There wasn't that much opportunity for things to go wrong either. Now, this has obviously changed massively, and this slide is only going to get more complex over the years. Now brands have to operate in apps and websites and CRM and customer services and internal comms and complaints. All of these things require language. They're all using words all the time. They're all probably written by very different people. And if you're a brand manager, if you're someone who has to look after a brand and try and make it consistent, this is the sort of slide that should give you nightmares, frankly, because how on earth are you going to make Coca-Cola feel consistent across all these different moments? You've probably got dozens of different writers, maybe dozens of different teams, maybe in different offices. How are you going to find that consistency? So you still have your big ad campaigns, of course, Coca-Cola still do that, taste the feeling, they have those big splashy moments where the language is meant to catch the eye and just kind of get someone thinking about the brand. But then you have much more complex moments. This is the Coca-Cola app where they want to walk you through that user journey, they want to get you through to A to B, they want you to give your personal details or subscribe or log in. That's a lot more language, there's a lot more words there. How do you do that in a way that feels like Coca-Cola? And then you just get stuff that comes totally out of the blue. No brand manager in the world or guidelines document could prepare for something like COVID. What is Coca-Cola meant to say in that moment? How should it sound? What should it talk about? It's a big global brand, so people are going to expect it to say something. It's a really tricky moment. What are you meant to do here? So brands are having to use language a lot more than ever before, and it puts a lot of pressure on those brands to get it right and to make it consistent. Now, this can also be very tricky, I suppose I would say that, but it can be really hard to get right because you've got to navigate and think about so many different things. And one of the reasons why it can be so tricky is that language is really open to interpretation, and it is really slippery. We all have different ideas of what different words mean. So to illustrate this, I'm going to tell you quite a naff joke, and then I'll explain it to you just to make it even more naff. But I said to my gym instructor, can you teach me to do the splits? He said, how flexible are you? You probably see where this is going. I said, I can't do Thursdays. Now, what's gone wrong in that conversation there? The word flexible has been misinterpreted. I'm saying flexible to mean my calendar, my diary, my availability. My gym instructor is saying flexible in terms of physical flexibility. So these sort of little misunderstandings, this slipperiness happens all the time in language. And it's really hard for brands to guarantee that what they want someone to feel and hear in their language is actually what that person is feeling and hearing. So, can anyone tell me, this is quite an old ad from Pepsi, just kind of generic bus stop ad. What's missing in this headline? Packed with taste of sugar. Can anyone tell me what's missing?
A comma?
Yeah, some form of punctuation, isn't it? Yeah, comma, full stop, something to break those two lines up. Because what Pepsi want to say is two things. Packed with taste, full stop. Less sugar, full stop. Those are two different messages, and you put them together and you get something quite compelling. Here, though, with just one long run sentence, you get packed with taste of sugar, which sounds like the last thing that you want in your drink. So it's a very small moment, and a proofreader would have picked that up very quickly. But again, it just shows that language it's hard, it's slippery. It doesn't always play by the rules you want it to. I have another example for you. Pop-Tarts, this is the US Pop-Tarts account. I like my tarts where I like my money, right on my fanny. That feels unfortunate to me. Obviously, in the US, that word just means something different. Here, it is something very different as well. And you can imagine how British Twitter responded. They thought it was hilarious. That's not what Pop-Tarts wanted people thinking about. We have, well, this is a good one from ASOS. Does anyone know what the word bust down means, or a bust down? So, I didn't know, I must say, and I don't think the ASOS person knew either, but this person tweeted saying, this dress is a bust down, and a bust down is a compliment, it's a good thing. If something is a bust down, it's bejeweled and looks expensive, you know, it might have lots of diamonds on it, so it's a kind of a compliment. But the ASOS social media manager just didn't know that and thought they were being complained to. So, hi, sorry to hear your dress is a bust down. So again, you can imagine the response on Twitter. And this is obviously a very silly example, but it's a bit of a problem, I think, for ASOS, because that's a brand that, you know, it's fast fashion, it's meant to be youthful and contemporary and, you know, feel like it's got its finger on the pulse. And moments like that just show that, oh, maybe it's slightly more old-fashioned, maybe it's a bit clunky, maybe it's just a big warehouse somewhere with loads of clothes in it. The brand starts to break down because it's shown that it's not quite as kind of savvy as it wants people to think it is. So, it's slippery because language is slippery, and that's why I think it's a really fun thing to work in, I have to say. You're working with Play-Doh the whole time, and you know, you need to be keeping yourself alive as a kind of reader and writer, seeing how language is changing. I'm now in my mid-30s, unfortunately, and you know, I no longer feel like I have like my finger on the pulse of what contemporary language is up to, which is a really exciting but challenging thing as a copywriter. You've got to keep that skill, that eye on how language is evolving. But if we do it well, it can be pretty transformative. And that's really why I'm here today, is obviously visual identity and visual development and design is amazing and can be transformative for brands. But I would say that the other half of the equation, the other half of the formula, is language. And if brands get that right, it can make a huge difference to how they're perceived and how they express themselves. So this is a talk about copywriting, so I'm legally obligated to bring up Innocent as like the example of tone of voice and the brand that's probably had the most success in the last 20 years with how it uses language. So if you think back to when Innocent launched in the late 90s, early noughties, there were lots of other smoothies out there, lots of other fruit juices. Smoothie is not a particularly hard product to make. You know, how do you make a really compelling, differentiated smoothie? I guess probably back at the time that there were lots of other smoothies that tasted similar, or you know, maybe they could have been the one that became the real kind of the star. I think what Innocent had though is just an incredible brand. They had this really lovingly well-crafted brand that they ruthlessly expressed again and again. And obviously the voice, the way they use language, is a really big part of that. So they have this kind of informal, cheeky, chirpy British voice here to save the peckish. And it flows through everything they do. I mean, you know, this is wackaging. This is where wackaging came from, the idea of sort of wacky packaging that talks to you. I think maybe the moment for this is slightly past. It gives me a bit of an allergic reaction looking at it right now. I don't particularly like it, but there's no denying the power of it. You know, people would pick up the cartons, they would take photos of it, they would celebrate that moment in a way that you would never normally do with just a carton of smoothie. But what's most amazing, I think, about Innocent is they really, really relentlessly drive this stuff through. So this is from their website, it is their address. This should be the most boring, functional moment for a brand, but they're not forgetting that it's also an opportunity to bring in their voice. So the entry road is on Kensal Road, just in case you thought you had to scale the fence. Most brands wouldn't take the time over that moment. They would just put the address up because they think, oh, it's just the address. It doesn't need anything else. What makes Innocent special is that craft and that love and that commitment to using that same approach to language. So we have Innocent. I suppose the heir to Innocent's crown right now is probably Oatly. They're the brand that right now feel like they are having the greatest success from how they think about language. So they've perfected this kind of snarky, slightly cynical, slightly sort of challenging voice that, you know, you see on their packaging, you see in the ads, you see everywhere the brand shows up. So stuff like this. We made this ad look like street art, so you would like it better than if it was just an ad. You know, that's kind of teasing the customer almost. It's kind of saying like, you know we're an advertiser and we want you to buy this stuff. We know you know that as well. So it's like a much more sort of complicated meta approach to how communication works. You've got little things like, you actually read this? Total success. Again, sort of undermining themselves, or sort of being self-deprecating. So again, I find this stuff a little bit annoying, I have to say, and I find it, it's kind of everywhere and become a bit ubiquitous. But again, no denying that it's an incredibly powerful way for Oatly to express who they are. And just as a sort of reminder, Oatly's not a new brand. It didn't just appear out of thin air like this. It's actually about 20 years old, I think, sort of late 90s. This is what it used to look like, and this is what it used to sound like. Healthy oats, dairy-free alternative to milk and soya. Incredibly basic, very functional, just purely descriptive. There's no sense of voice there as well. But again, it's that, they've found that language, they've found that approach to words, which starts to elevate them against all the competition. Because dairy-free alternative milk is not a particularly hard product to do. How do you make that milk really, really outstanding? You can do it through the product, but you can also do it through the brand, and words are a big part of that. And then final example, just to show that it's not all packaging and kind of consumer goods. Monzo, I think, is an example of a brand that, the voice is not particularly interesting or eye-catching. It's just simple and clear and kind of easy to use. But if you think of when Monzo first appeared, it's kind of transformative. This was a bank that you could use through your phone, and it was talking to you in this way that was simple and clear and easy. Whereas most banks previously had to talk to you in a way that was corporate and formal and full of jargon. So it felt like a total breath of fresh air. And the way that they did that is that they put writers at the heart of their brand from the very beginning. I think they hired a writer really early on. They then built out a tone of voice for them. They put the tone of voice guidelines on the website as a way of saying, look, the way we use language is really important to us. We want to make sure it's easy for you as our customer. So please hold us to this, hold us to account on whether we are delivering to this voice. And again, they've just found this amazing way of making it feel consistent everywhere you encounter Monzo. This is a conversation I had with one of their customer services team a couple of years ago, and I was kind of blown away, but it just sounded like Monzo. It didn't suddenly sound formal or corporate, it didn't suddenly switch to a different voice. It all sounded like it was coming from the same place. So that's what words and brands can do. I think when brands invest in their language, they can find something that it's just another tool, it's another way of standing out. And I think the great shame, frankly, of lots of brand identity projects is that words are kind of an afterthought, or maybe they're a page in the guidelines. And I suppose we would say this, but we think there's such a role for language to play here. And if you can get visual and verbal branding working side by side, you start to get something really compelling. But then I wanted to talk about more specifically how words can fit into the design process and how they can inspire better, more interesting, richer design. So the first thing to say here is that I've been a copywriter for 11, 12 years now. I've probably worked with hundreds of designers, dozens of different design agencies. They were all writers. Now, some of them might be slightly reluctant writers. They may not always enjoyed writing, but there was always a part of the process where they had to contribute some language to the brand or to the way we were describing the project. Because, as I'm sure we all know, the whole thing just runs on language. From the brief from the client to the strategy to generating concepts, talking about concepts, presenting, writing your creative rationales, explaining why you have done certain things or you've chosen certain approaches. It all relies on words. So I think the designers that I work with that feel most confident with this are the ones that lean into writing. They might not call themselves copywriters, but they really know that it's an essential part of what they do, and that you might have the most beautifully crafted design concept in the world, but if the way you're explaining it, or if the way it gets passed on to the CEO or someone who's not in the room with you, if that falls down because of the language, then the whole thing might fall down. But I wanted to talk about 3 more sort of frequent, common ways that I think designers are asked to use language or think about language. The first one is naming. So lots of designers, in my experience, are asked to help out with naming, or a brief will come into an agency and say, we want a name, then the visual identity. So how do we find that foundational moment for a brand? There's tone of voice, obviously. You might be creating the visual identity. What is the verbal identity that goes alongside it? And then there's just lots and lots of good old-fashioned writing. You know, we need a headline for this, or quickly write some body copy for this. You know, how do you do that in a way that, you know, feels as good and as credible as the design you're creating? So I thought I'd start with naming. I don't know if anyone has had any experience with naming so far. It is a joy, it can be a delight, it can be also a total headache, because you know, the thing you are trying to find is so small and so singular. It's almost like cracking a nut, you know, it's like, or like hitting a bullseye with an arrow. Whenever we start to work with new clients and we're talking about naming, I often get the sense that this is kind of the inner monologue that is going on inside their head. You know, our name has to tell people exactly what we do and has to sound friendly and supportive, but also credible. It should be more than 5 letters, plus it needs to communicate honestly, authenticity. You know, whoa, it's never going to do that. You know, no name in the world can possibly communicate or express all these things. So what we say to clients is, you're not really looking for a name, you're looking for a unicorn, and that's not going to happen. You're not going to find this magical solution that's the name of your dreams. So one of the things that we do with naming is it's sort of expectation setting and explaining, you know, this is how naming works, this is what we can find for you, rather than promising them the moon. I think the other, you know, there's some other amazing thing to remember about naming is that the history of branding is littered with names that shouldn't have worked, that should have probably been killed in the first round presentation. You think of Apple, that's got nothing to do with computers, nothing to do with tech. Why pick that soft fruit as a way of talking about hardware initially? Liquid death, you know, you're talking about water, this sort of precious life source that covers the planet, and you're calling it death. That seems like a slightly odd choice. And Virgin, you think of Richard Branson in the early 70s. He's a young entrepreneur, he's going out pitching for investment, he needs people to buy into him, to think he's credible so that they will give him lots of money, and he's calling himself Virgin, like an inexperienced sort of novice, not quite sure what to do. Again, it feels like a really odd choice. But of course all these names are amazing, and the identities that they helped create are amazing. So that's one of the other things we have to remind clients is, you know, don't be afraid to explore when you're looking for a name. Don't sort of self-censor. Like, you might have an idea of what you think your name should be, but let's keep it very open and very flexible, because you might find something much more interesting. The other tricky thing I think about naming is that there are just so many different types of names out there, and that can be really hard for a client or for a brand to figure out what the right one for them is. So TikTok, for example, that uses rhythm and kind of alliteration. It uses kind of quick, short sounds to explain or express what the brand is about, you know, quick, digestible content. You've got something like British Airways, very different, very descriptive, very functional. This is what we do, this is where we're from. You've got something like Rolex, which, you know, now sounds very premium and luxurious, but you know, as far as I understand, it was chosen because it was just short enough to fit on a watch face. There was no other great sort of logical rationale behind it. It just worked for where they wanted the name to go. Even more randomly, you have something like Kodak, which the founder just liked the letter K, and so wanted a name built around it. And that's often one of the things you have to deal with in naming, is very subjective opinions, where, you know, people just have a feeling of what the right name is. And then finally, Häagen-Dazs, which, yeah, hard to spell, hard to say, I don't know if I've ever spelled it correctly once, it just seems right for that brand. And Häagen-Dazs is another one, like Rolex, which is a totally made up word. It sounds sort of German or maybe Austrian or sort of Scandinavian, but it isn't really from any of those places. It just kind of borrows some of the cues of those language. You know, you've got the little umlaut on top of the A, so it sort of sounds European or sort of Scandi, but isn't really at all. So I thought I'd talk you through one of our naming case studies just to show you how we do it and why I think it can be such an interesting moment for the brand and the design process. This is Thimble. Now Thimble is an insurance company based in New York, and they do a very particular type of insurance. They basically work for freelancers or small business people. So someone like a wedding photographer or a carpenter. You know, people who don't really need to be insured all the time, but they only need it for certain specific moments. You know, if you're a wedding photographer, you might be a wedding photographer Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but the rest of the week you're unlikely to be doing that job, so you don't need to be insured for the whole time. Now, a traditional insurance company will try and sort of sell you an annual policy, you're covered the whole time, it's very expensive, it's kind of inefficient, because all you need is Friday, Saturday and Sunday. So they're a much quicker, more agile way of getting insurance. You can get insured very quickly, and then you can turn the insurance off. Now, this was actually a renaming job, which if naming is hard, renaming is something else, because people are already attached to a name, they've already got feelings towards that name. So Thimble started life as Verifly. So Verifly, they did insurance as well, but it was even more niche. They insured flying drones. So you can see where the name comes from, verification and flying, you get Verifly. This is from the client brief at the time. They're like, this name is not working for us anymore because we are a much bigger business. We're talking to different audiences. We're talking to wedding photographers and carpenters. What does Verifly mean for them? You know, it's confusing to the audience. So we need a new name that sort of speaks to that idea of flexibility and ease. So we started to explore lots of things, and the way we would approach naming is go through 3 rounds of development. You never ever get it right first time round, and anyone who says to you, come to a naming workshop this afternoon, we'll find a name, they are very misguided. You know, it will take weeks and weeks to find this. But we explored this name Thimble because we thought there was something kind of interesting. A thimble is a kind of small object, it's protective, but it's not particularly sort of grand or impressive. It feels kind of approachable and easy to use. So we kind of talked them through Thimble and sort of explained why we thought it could be such a useful name for them. You know, small business cover you can trust. It's about being small and nimble and agile. And they really bought into it. I mean, we went through lots of other names and we explored lots of different other ways in, but Thimble was the one that really stuck with them. Now, the reason why I'm telling you about Thimble is I just think this is why naming is so interesting and so powerful, because the visual partner, the design agency, took that name and just ran with it. So the logo features a thimble. They created this, I'm not sure what you call it, sort of physical logo maybe. You know, it's a kind of physical thing that would turn green when you're insured and off when you're not insured. So it became a really quick way of just showing what the brand and the proposition was. We found this sort of quick, nimble approach to messaging. So quick thinking insurance for fast moving businesses. The voice is really quick and simple and easy. And hopefully this will work with sound. I'll show you a little 15-second ad. You can see how they really lent into the idea of using the thimble.
Thimble is small business insurance you can turn on for an hour, a day, or a month. And turn off when you're not working, but turn on when you are. And off when you're not. Thimble is business insurance that works when you do.
So even the little works when you do flash green there. Now, the reason why I think this is cool is because you don't get any of that without the name. You know, if you pull the name out and just call them Insure Corp, you know, you can't get anywhere close to that. So that's why I think if in the future you're asked to be involved in naming processes, like really go for it, because if you have an idea for what the brand should do, what it should sound like, the best way to capture that is to build it in from the foundation, which is where the name comes in. Okay, so that's naming. The second one I want to look at is tone of voice. And tone of voice can be a really useful way of, basically, you know, if 2 brands have very similar things to say, they're in a marketplace that's very competitive, you know, there's no real difference between them. Voice can be a really useful way of just standing out from the crowd, you know, just showing off your personality, communicating to an audience, you know, with your sort of brand. So this is the gym, the right then, let's get rid of this muffin top gym. And the voice here, the voice that they're using, it's kind of friendly and approachable. I think it's basically saying don't take this too seriously. We don't take it too seriously. You know, if you just want to come here once a month, that is absolutely fine. Don't feel any pressure or intimidation. You know, this is not a scary gym to go to. Whereas this gentleman is obviously giving off a very different vibe. So this is Gymbox, new ways to destroy yourself Spartan training camp. Now obviously the picture is doing a lot of the tonal sort of work here and giving off that impression. But the language, destroy yourself. You know, even new ways, I think, is so smart because it kind of suggests that you, as the gym goer, you're done with the old ways. Like you've gone through all the old ways of destroying yourself, and now there's a new challenge for you. But at heart, it's kind of the same message as the previous one. It's basically just saying, come to our gym. But the language, the tone, just separates it out in a way that makes those 2 gyms seem like, from different planets. And so if one Jim is, you know, if you're one member of the audience or the other, you know, you start to identify which one is going to be most useful for you. Another quick example of the power of voice. This is where the audience participation starts, I should warn you. So I'm going to give you a little quiz. I've got 5 different car brands. I'm not going to show you any logos, any visual cues whatsoever. I want you to guess, just based on the words alone, based on the tone that you hear in your heads, who you think is talking. So I'll read them out. We've got Bentley, we've got BMW, we've got Ford, we've got Honda, and we've got Land Rover. Sorry if it's a bit teeny for people. And it's just a bit great. So, number 1, our vehicles show what's possible when form and function come together with style and content. We put all our vehicles through the toughest tests in the world's most challenging terrains, and now it's your turn. Number 2, if you'd like to discuss your purchasing interest with one of our appointed representatives directly, please contact us on one of the following numbers. 3, for everyone as obsessed with electronic performance as we are, get behind the wheel and experience the joy of driving firsthand at our various events and programs. 4, our plan is actually quite simple, to build the best vehicles on the road today and make them affordable for millions. When do we plan to do this? It's already underway. And 5, we feel it at the start of every project, no matter what car. But with this model, it was special. You'll know it when you feel it, and when you do, you'll understand why this car means more to us than anything we've ever created before. So do any of those just immediately leap off the screen and you know which brand is talking? Anyone want to go first? Yeah, you get it. You have my eternal gratitude, thank you.
For the first one, I think that would be the Land Rover.
Okay, so and what sounds Land Rovery about it to you?
Just the terrain's just different
Yeah,
terrains for that.
yeah, so
It's not just a normal car they just take on the motorway.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
open to more.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like terrain suggests mountain or, you know, going off
Just
the road.
road trips and
Yeah,
things like
exactly, exactly. And even a little moment like, and now it's your turn. It has that sort of adventurous, kind of challenging tone. This is not just about dropping the kids off at school or going to the supermarket. This is much more of an adventure. Okay, that might be longer. Any others stand out? Anyone else? Yes, at the back there. Oh, okay. And what sounds Bentley-ish about number 2?
It's a hot car. Very like close up, don't see advertising for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of selling by not selling almost. It's a fascinating sentence because really what it's, I think you could just rewrite it as call us on 0207, like you could just say get in touch if you want to, but they've dressed it up in this really performative way. You know, they're using purchasing interest, which no human being would ever use themselves. Appointed representatives, you know, the language is all, it's all performative. There are lots of these flourishes that add to that sort of posh premium voice. Whenever I hear that in my head, it always sounds a bit like a butler, like, you know, someone who's really going to extreme lengths to make sure you, the customer, are happy. Okay, any others sort of stand out for you? Yes, yes.
It's number 3 BMW.
Okay, what's BMW about it?
The way it says electrified performance, it gives race car vibes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, so you're talking about, it's not just A to B, is it? Performance, it's sort of, you know, obsession, that everyone is obsessed with, you know. Ford drivers aren't obsessed with their cars, but BMW ones are. So again, talking about that is a really nice thing to do. Great. Again, in the final 2, we have a sense of what 500. How about number 4?
Is that Honda?
Okay. What's Honda about it?
It's just affordable for millions.
Yeah. It's
Rather than, because I think Fords are not as affordable for everyone.
okay.
But Hondas are
Interesting.
more
Okay.
of a family car rather than
Sure.
just for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, shall I? Oh, Andy, go for it.
I think number 4 is Ford.
What's Fordish about it?
Because when it was first launched by Ford, his vision was to make an affordable car. And
Okay.
it's a premium.
Yeah.
So historically, possibly.
Okay.
Ford.
Okay, let's see how we've done then. So we did pretty well. And I have to say, I've run this exercise with lots and lots of clients. And sometimes I don't get any of them, which is always makes me slightly nervous about the rest of the project, frankly. So kudos to you all. I think you're right. That Ford example, you know, the language is kind of plain and simple. That is kind of getting A to B. Whereas Honda, you know, think of the tagline, the power of dreams. You know, this is a brand that's comfortable talking about emotions and feelings, so it makes sense that they would do the same, even though they're just talking about a specific model. So, voice can be really powerful. particularly if there are any other visual cues or elements. And there are lots of times that brands talk to us where we don't have any of that. You know, an SMS from a brand, or you know, a push notification. You're unlikely to see much else other than language. So language can be a really powerful way of just reminding you who is speaking. This is a project that we worked on a few years ago with Wieden Kennedy. This was to rebrand Formula One. They had been taken over by new owners, these American owners called Liberty. And basically their whole mission here was to reinvigorate the brand, because I don't know if there are any Formula One fans in the room, but the sport was seen to be kind of drifting and going nowhere. The audience were kind of getting older, you know, people had felt as though the sort of passion and the fire and the exhilaration that Formula One should have had disappeared, and it become this pretty corporate, kind of technical, bureaucratic sport. So we were brought in alongside Wieden Kennedy. Wieden Kennedy were thinking about the overall brand strategy and visual identity. We were thinking about development identity. And the reason why I wanted to use this example is, it's basically, well, first of all, to show this moustache, just an incredible feat, I think, truly remarkable. The second thing is, I just love this quote. So this is Chase Carey. He was the CEO of Formula One at the time. And this was kind of his brief, basically. Bring the shock and awe back into Formula One. And I think for a writer or any creative, hearing those words is pretty exciting. Those are big, impactful, punchy words, shock and awe. I think what it does is it sets up that the ambition for this branding project is not to play it safe. We're not tinkering around the edges here. We want to find something that really reinvigorates the sport. So I think for designers, you know, if you're ever handed a strategy or a brief and it doesn't make you feel anything, I think that's the time to push back and say, we need to find the emotion here. Like, you need to get me excited as a fellow human being. Because when we saw this, we thought, okay, this guy is up for something that's going to be pretty special. So this was our starting point for the voice. This is kind of page 1 of the term voice. Unleash a voice of blood and oil. Blood, because Formula One is meant to be exhilarating, it's meant to get your heart pounding, you're meant to feel things as you watch it. And then oil, because it's kind of still a dirty manual sport. You know, there's oil under the fingernails there. So, you know, we can't forget this isn't something that's sanitized or clean. Now you put those two things together, you start to get something special, and then you unleash it. I think even that word unleash is hopefully doing a lot to explain what the voice should sound like. If it said talk in a voice of blood and oil, or speak in a voice of blood and oil, you wouldn't have that same impact. So this was the sort of starting point for the voice. And then we brought it to life everywhere, and this is a really important thing to do in voice. You know, you need to show how it can work practically, in the same way that, you know, a visual identity is only as good as its practical applications. So headlines, big splashy moments like worship at the temple of speed, feel the blood boil, through to smaller ones. And I won't read this all out because it's a presentation from a copywriter. There are a lot of words, I get it, but I'm not going to read it all out. But this is just to show you how we even took the website, which previously kind of sounded like Wikipedia, very factual, very descriptive, not really any sense that Formula One loved this stuff as much as they wanted you to. And we rewrote it in a way that would bring the voice to life, would start telling richer, more interesting stories. And then my final example here, and this is the nerdiest example I'm going to show. This is, we worked with Formula One's kind of B2B kind of sales team. This was the team that would go out and sell tickets, not to individual fans, but sell tickets to corporate companies who wanted to do big hospitality away days. You know, they want to take their whole team out to Silverstone and show them a good time. And you can see on the left, and I will read this first sentence out. In today's world, every business needs to show demonstrable and tangible value in their hospitality and business development program. You know, that is classic corporate writing. And when we spoke to this team, we were like, do the people you write for, do they like Formula One? Are they excited about Formula One? Of course, they love Formula One. They can't wait to go. Like, well, you should speak to them in the same way that you would any other audience member. Like, you don't need to sort of suddenly become really corporate and formal just because you're writing for a corporate audience. Okay, and then the final, I think, area that I see designers being drafted in a lot, often at sort of last minute because the copywriter is ill or has gone on lunch break or something. You know, how do you start creating actual copy for brands in a way that works just as beautifully as the design? So, the project I wanted to talk about here is one that we did for Argos. This is about getting on for 9 years now, so it's a little bit historic. It was working with the partners who were the design agency at the time. And we all know what Argos sell, obviously. It's things like toasters, or pillows, or kettles. And these are kind of a copywriter's nightmare, because there is nothing interesting to say about these products. You know, they are so ubiquitous, we all have them in our houses. Unless there is something truly special, and usually that means it's very expensive, there's not really anything to write interesting copy around. So the approach we took is, well, let's not really write about the product at all. Let's just use the packaging as an opportunity to tell little stories about the products. You know, these are very basic functional products, but how can we bring some playfulness into the language? So we created these little sort of 3 or 4 line stories, which basically just brought the product to life. So turn on, cool down, turn off, or bread, toast, butter, jam, fill, boil, pour, cover. And you start to have a lot of playfulness with the language. I think, you know, we all know what a microwave is. It's kind of pointless or redundant to explain to people what a microwave is or how to use it. But you can still do that in a way that's kind of quick and simple and playful. So heat, ding, done. This one's my favourite. You know, you can talk about the emotions that the customer might be feeling as they use this product. Cross fingers, step on, look down. You know, again, we're not really talking about scales at all. We're just using it as a vehicle to sort of have some fun with the language. One of my favourite things about this project is, so Argos, they probably have about 500 of these different sort of very basic products that they wanted packaging copy for, and they didn't ask us to do all of them, I would say. So we did a sort of sample, and then we created guidelines for their internal team to do the rest. And this is where this one comes from. So sheep, 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 sleep, which I think is just, I mean, it's beautiful. It's so clever. It just feels so effortless. It's not wasting your time talking about the pillow or the thread count or, you know, or the feathers inside or whatever. It's just using this as a moment to have fun and tell a story. So I think that's the value of sort of thinking about that copy, thinking about that writing is, I think the design is great. It's sort of minimalist, it's bold, it kind of speaks back to Argos. But I think using that copy is a moment to elevate it. So I think in the future, if at last minute anyone is asking you to sort of think about writing, think about it as equally a powerful moment to sort of express the brand and sort of show who that brand is about. Okay, so those are the 3 areas that I most see designers getting involved in writing. Naming, super fun, bit of a headache, but a really powerful moment to sort of sum up the brand or set the brand off on the right foot. Tone of voice, which is visual identity, sort of poor cousin, but I think increasingly brands want tone of voice, they want to feel like it's part of the brand identity. And then good old-fashioned writing, whether that's headlines or body copy or whatever it is, it's all a powerful moment for the brand. Okay, so my final section for you today is just to end quickly on what this might all mean for you as future designers and thinkers and creators and leaders. You know, I think words can be a really important part of what you do. First thing to say is, this stuff is growing, and in the 11 or 12 years as a copywriter, I've seen the difference in how voice and language is treated from 11 years ago to how it's treated now. When ReadWords started out, we were 4 people in one very tiny windowless room, basically, in Soho. And now we are a little bit bigger, not massive, but still there's growth there. We're 15 people across 2 offices. We're in Soho in London, and we've got a team in New York. And we can only grow like that because clients are asking about this more. You know, we're starting to make more contacts. You know, people are thinking more about language. So yes, clients definitely think about it more than ever. And I'm always amazed at the number of job titles I see going around that talk about language specifically in a way that it never used to happen. You know, brands are now hiring their own global identity director or head of copy or copy director. None of this stuff was happening when I first started. And then so did agencies. And I think the rise of the in-house writing team at agencies was really interesting. I mean, these are just a few of the ones that we think do a really good job. So Ragged Edge, Koto, Design Studio. But lots more are starting to build out their writing disciplines. So, I suppose the point here, and Andy, you'll forgive me with this, I'm here to pitch that if you're interested in language, if you like writing, brand writing is a really cool career. It's really interesting. You know, design is wonderful as well. But if you have this passion, if you have this interest in language, then I think brand writing can be something that's really useful to pursue. Because the first thing to say is that unlike design, there aren't really any pathways into becoming a brand writer. There aren't really sort of university courses. You know, there's a few things that you can do, but it really means that people come from all sorts of different places. So at ReadWords, we have creative writers, we've got designers. Our creative director in New York was a designer at Designbridge for a long time. We've got fine art, we've got French history, zoology. Like, it's a real rag bag of different disciplines because it is still open. And it's really fun, I think I should say. It's part creative, it's part strategy. You know, you're often working at the very start of a project or a brand, like naming, where you're really setting up the whole direction. It is involved everywhere, so you get to work across all the moments for a brand. You know, you might be writing the very final moments where it is communication, like push notifications or advertising. You know, you're kind of just expressing the brand, or you might be there at the very beginning. And it's definitely growing, I think, very powerful. So, if any of you are kind of thinking, I kind of like language, I think maybe I could be a brand writer. Here are a few different ways to spot where you are. The first one is you're passionate about words, you're kind of interested in it, you like talking about words or thinking about words. Another really useful way to tell this is if you just rewrite ads that you see on the bus. Like if you sit on the bus or on the train and think, God, that ad is really weak. You know, that headline doesn't make any sense, that body copy is basically gibberish. That is a really good sign. In the same way that designers like to fix kind of visual identity that they see. You know, if you want to constantly rewrite language, that's a really useful sign. And the final one is you're a bit of a perfectionist, so whether it's emails or WhatsApps, whatever it is, if you take a lot of care over this, then that's a really useful sign that maybe brand writing is for you. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour into words and brands and why brands are thinking about language more than ever, what words and language can do for design, and then what it can do for you all. I thought I'd stop now for any questions, and yeah, I'm happy to answer whether it's about how to become a copywriter or what good copywriting looks like. Yeah, over to you guys. Yes, but yeah, go for it.
You said you try and keep up with like modern use of language.
Try,
How
yeah.
do you go about like looking for examples or research?
Yeah. So if it's a product, if it's a brand in a space that I have no experience in at all, I think it's really important to spend time getting to know how language works in that way. So reading forums or going onto social and seeing how people are talking about a brand. I think if you don't do that step, that's where it can start to feel like, you know, why is this 35-year-old guy writing about skincare that's aimed at 20-year-old? You know, just you can very quickly tell there's a lack of authenticity there. So one of the ways we can try and close that gap is just spending, you know, doing a bit more of an audit, a bit of a safari, and kind of spending as much time as possible with that language. But it's hard. It's hard. I think that's the thing that I sort of think about most is, you know, language can move so quickly. You know, how do you keep up with it? But yeah, it takes that effort of going into a particular space. Great. Any others? Yes.
I was just going to ask, do you notice like trends in, you know, in like sort of style of copy or like techniques that, you know, like you would with like visual?
Yeah, definitely. So Oatly, I think there's a lot of Oatly inspired copy around at the moment, which I always think, you know, that's fine, but customers know, you know, even if a customer can't articulate, then you've ripped off Oatly, they still know that you're talking in the same way. So I think it can be dangerous. Naming trends is something we spot a lot about. You know, you think of you know, Monzo and sort of those abstract, quite short, rounded names, lots of O sounds. You know, that was definitely a trend that happened sort of 10 years ago. And again, the thing we always say to clients is, do you want to follow that trend? That's fine, because that might be a way of showing credibility or fitting in, or do you want to stay away from it? Because either way, you should think about it at the beginning and, you know, be strategic about it. So yeah, definitely lots of trends. We actually do a quarterly trend report called Hot Words, which basically picks up on, you know, what we're spotting in the world of copywriting.
Thank you.
No worries. And yes, yeah, go for it.
Do you like emojis? I know you use
I do. For a long time I didn't. I felt, I don't know, maybe I was too old, but I think they're a really powerful way of adding tone in very quickly, and particularly, I mean, we probably all know that feeling of, you know, someone sends you a WhatsApp, you think, oh, they're being a bit rude, or a bit, you know, the tone has gone missing there. So I think emojis are quite a useful way of just kind of, it's like adding a stamp of like, this is a friendly message, or like, I do, you know, I want to be polite or something. I think they can be quite powerful. Yeah.
And your trend reports, do you publish them? Do
Yeah, we do. So I can send around our newsletter. If you sign up to that, you'll get a quarterly report every quarter, and that also drops straight into your inbox. And it's about a sort of 10-page read into what we're seeing as interesting about copywriting. What do you feel about emojis? Just out of curiosity.
I feel like you use too many of them.
Yeah, that's so funny. When we work with clients who, you know, they've decided that emojis are going to be a big part of their voice, and we create the guidelines. A big thing we have to talk to them about is how many is too many, because it only takes one freelance copywriter to go wild, and suddenly emojis are everywhere. So we'll often talk to them like, you're probably a brand that can get away with like one emoji per message. Like, don't overdo it. But yeah, I think it can be.
The email header is really annoying.
Yeah.
Email subject.
Yeah. No, I
Well, I was only joking.
Good. Great, thank you. Yes, sorry, go for it.
Yeah, I love that. In advertising, copywriting has been much more established going way back in the growth of agencies like yours, which come into brand.
Yeah.
How inseparable are those worlds becoming now?
That's really interesting. Good question. I think it's interesting how many ad agencies are now creating their own design studios. So Wieden & Kennedy, for example, that's now called not W&K, but that's their sort of in-house design agency. Mother, big ad agency, they have Mother Design. I think it's interesting how you would think that it could all just work together under one brand or one company, but I think there's an increasing realization that like, brand design is obviously a big specialism, and brand writing is a specialism within that. But the honest answer is we don't tend to work too closely with ad creatives. It tends to be brand designers or brand strategists who are sort of operating in the same space. But yeah, no, it definitely feels like it's a sort of growing discipline, and it's something that I think agencies are switching on to a little bit. Great. Yes, please go.
So still growing despite AI?
Oh God. AI keeps me up. So yes. What do I think about? I think in all honesty, I think AI is probably going to take lots of bits of copywriting away. So sort of in my early career, I spent about a month just writing SMS messages for brand. But I don't miss that. You know, if AI can do that quickly and cheaply, and it's pretty close, I'm more than happy to give that stuff away. It's things like naming and strategy and messaging that I think require conversation, they require workshops, they require seeing your clients and getting to know them. So I think my hope is that AI will take a lot of the boring functional stuff, and it will leave, we'll be left with the kind of the fun, creative, kind of chewy stuff. Yeah, exactly, the craft, exactly. So I think if you use ChatGPT or Gemini, Google's AI to create copy at the moment, it's still quite far, I think, from what you would expect from a sort of professional human copywriter. So I think it's got a little while to catch up. But yeah, no, that does sometimes keep me up. Yes, go for it.
So just on, I thought, well, if it's going, if AI's going to take away a lot of the low-hanging fruit, how are young writers going to learn?
Oh, that's a good question. That's really interesting. When I think of the junior writers that we hire at Read Words, we want them to do naming and strategy and messaging and voice. We don't just want them to bash out promotional emails for a brand. So I think I would like to think that young writers, the quicker you can get into naming or strategy, that's good development for you. I'm not sure there's much to be gained in that sort of churning things out. Because I think very quickly, if you're a good writer, you learn how to do that. Yeah, exactly. But no, I'll be honest, that's not something I've thought about too much. Yes, you.
How important is reading to you and the pleasure of reading?
I'm a big reader. I'm a real word nerd, I have to say, a bit of a bookworm. So I think it's really important. I think that is where you, in the same way, Julian, when you're talking about going around the world and spotting design and building that part of your process, the same happens with reading. And I think the more voracious a reader, the more open you can be, the better. So yes, I think it's hard to be a copywriter if you don't like reading. If it's not part of your just day to day or week to week, I think it's hard. Great.
Time for the rough.
Oh, sorry. No. If there are any more questions, please.